I do have news directly from the President of the United States that was just shared with me in the Oval Office from President Trump directly, an update on the New Jersey drone.
It looks like a spaceship, right?
I'm kidding, it's like the size of our RV.
There's three right there.
There's a third.
After research and study, the drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons.
The New Jersey drones, initially spotted in the northern part of the state, now being reported further south. Sightings also now being reported in New York City.
This was not the enemy.
In the closing weeks of 2024, something strange began happening around heavily populated areas on the east coast of the United States. Odd, flying objects started showing up, seemingly without explanation.
The FBI now investigating multiple reports of unidentified drones flying over New Jersey, some as large as a small car.
What started as curiosity soon began to spark national security concerns.
One lawmaker is calling for a state of emergency, while another has an ominous theory about a foreign adversary.
Speculation circulated. Maybe these weren't UFOs from another planet, but maybe they were something even more sinister.
Many still have questions, including Congressman Jeff Van Drew, who says individuals with high security clearance have a theory about where the drones come from.
Their concern is that a mothership has left from Iran weeks ago, coinciding about the time somewhere along the area of the United States.
As it turned out, the drones, as they were being called, weren't just showing up over residential areas. There were reports of sightings over military installations. I'm Andy Stumpf, and this is Black Project. Though initially referred to as the New Jersey drones, they started appearing around areas that were home to major military bases.
We have them at Langley Air Force Base. We have them at Andrews Air Force Base. We've got them all over the East Coast, West Coast, and we don't have situational awareness. And for me, that's problematic, especially in the national security arena, because the taxpayer expects our military, our national security and defense systems, and our intelligence community to always be prepared.
Here's former senior leader of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program and UAP whistleblower Lou Elizondo. To him, one of the most concerning aspects of the drone activity was how they seemed to operate.
And yet here we are with these drones. No one knows where they're from. No one knows who's flying them. No one knows how it's being done. Some of these things are flying over the horizon, right? Oh, so your line of sight. So now you're talking a sophisticated infrastructure that you either have to have an airborne asset or you have to have some sort of spaceborne platform that's repeating that signal for you back and forth. Longevity, loiter time. These things are the size of a small SUV and able to hover for 5, 6, maybe 10 hours at a time. Look, brother, you know as I do, right? You know, there's two types of propulsion really that you can utilize. There's liquid propulsion like gasoline or diesel or kerosene, some combustible, right? But at 7.5 pounds per gallon, you chew through that pretty quickly. So, you know, most of your fixed wing platforms can use that type of fuel, JP8 or something like that, but they're not going to have the hover capability, right? They have their fixed wing platforms. If you want to hover, like the quadcopters and some of these more sophisticated, most of those are electric powered, battery powered, lithium ion, and you don't have the longevity that you would simply have with another type of fuel. And so being able to fly in a racetrack formation, right, something that's very typical for us as ISR or reconnaissance, and able to do so with complete anonymity and be able to be deployed and recovered, right, completely anonymously and potentially maintained. That's a problem, man. That is a significant problem we're facing.
British UAP researcher Vinnie Adams frequently speaks with military officials, experts, and intelligence insiders, including DARPA project manager and Wright-Patterson senior research scientist Lieutenant Colonel John Blitch, New Jersey Mayor Michael Melham, and intelligence analyst Bob McGuire. He's been covering the New Jersey drones issue for months. And some of the details that he's uncovered about the drones over military installations left him deeply concerned as well.
I personally spoke to some people who had witnessed these things firsthand, both here in the UK and in the US, and they were reporting very strange capabilities. These things were outpacing fighter jets. They were silent. They were able to disappear and reappear at will, almost like they had control. of the domain that they were in. These things were spotted above sensitive military installations that we know have anti-drone capabilities, whether it be geofences to stop them entering the airspace above these bases, or even sort of these handheld technologies that can be deployed to bring them down. Some of these objects were said to be the size of an SUV, which obviously isn't any kind of terrestrial or certainly, everyday hobbyist drone. There was just so many things that they couldn't work out the origin of these objects. Where were they coming from? Where were they going? How were they remaining in place or in the area for many, many hours at a time? This is a highly advanced technology. Could it be adversarial? China, Russia? Well, if it is, then they've obviously cracked something that we haven't, or the US hasn't, and that's concerning in itself.
The nature of classified black programs makes it difficult to confirm what these drones actually are and who is operating them. However, looking at the history of some defense contractors may offer some clues as to what is technologically possible. In the wake of World War II, the U.S. Air Force recognized that it needed a new generation of jets if it wanted to be able to defend the country against warplanes similar to the ones that had been developed by the Nazis. A young aeronautical engineer at the aviation company Lockheed Martin named Kelly Johnson took up the challenge and made the development of a jet airplane the primary mission of the company's new advanced development projects, known internally as Skunk Works. Operating out of a small building that was saturated by the smell of nearby plastic factories, within 6 months, Johnson's team developed America's first fighter jet, the P-80 Shooting Star.
The world's fastest plane, the jet-propelled P-80 Shooting Star, is revealed by the Army Air Forces. The P-80 is heavily armed and reaches a speed of nearly 9 miles a minute. Allied air forces now have undisputed mastery of the enemy.
Soon, they got another request. This one was from the CIA. The agency wanted the Skunk Works division to build the world's most advanced spy plane. To construct and test it, Johnson moved operations to an airbase in Nevada that many people now know as Area 51.
The area is isolated from prying eyes by the AEC range, with lethal reminders of past atomic explosions.
The end of World War II, how it ended, was an absolute turning point in modern American history, in humanity and also in weapons technology.
That's Pulitzer Prize finalist and author of books including Area 51, Surprise, Kill, Vanish, The Pentagon's Brain, Nuclear War, and other bestsellers that look at military and intelligence history.
Area 51 is a classified military base inside of a classified nuclear testing range called the Nevada Test Site. The name has changed. I still call it the Nevada Test Site. Inside a classified facility called the the Nevada Test and Training Range. It's a massive piece of land, and it was the perfect place for the CIA to set up a base to build spy planes that could spy on the Soviet Union from overhead. Very specifically to figure out what the Soviets were up to and whether they were going to start nuclear World War III.
The result of Kelly's team's work was the U-2 spy plane.
An airplane that would cruise well above 70,000 feet. One that would travel almost as far as a B-52 and remain in the air for 10 hours. For the first time in jet history, sensitive electronic equipment is being carried to heights where it can search for any number of radio, TV, or radar signals and record this information for detailed analysis.
People who are not familiar with the U-2, it essentially looked like a flying cross because the wingspan is so wide. And before they were painted black, they were silver, and they would reflect the sun. And so there was no such thing as an aircraft that could fly at 70,000 feet. A commercial aircraft flies at like 25,000 feet at the time. So, of course, people saw this. And, people call up their congressman convinced they saw a UFO. Because that's exactly what it looked like.
Though remarkably advanced for the time, the U-2 had critical flaws. Mainly, elements of the design were too big, which prevented it from going undetected by enemy surveillance. In fact, one was shot down over Cuba by the Soviet Air Defense Forces.
In Moscow, Nikita Khrushchev is shown as he told the Soviet Presidium that pilot Gary Powers of the downed American reconnaissance plane was alive, and that Russia had seized spy photographs made 1,400 miles inside Soviet borders.
The CIA would have Johnson's team work on developing new craft under the code name Project Oxcart. First was the A-12, which would eventually fly missions over Vietnam. Next came the legendary SR-71.
And for reader or listeners who don't know, we'll just say, if they saw the X-Men movies, the plane those superheroes fly is essentially the SR-71.
For context of just how prolific this technology was for the time, even the pilots' wristwatches had to use exotic technology to withstand the G-forces that could cause traditional mechanical watches to malfunction.
Accutron, issued to X-15 pilots by the United States government.
This was years before Seiko developed the quartz movement that powers many modern watches. Pilots wore Bulova Accutron astronaut watches, which used a tuning fork oscillator that vibrated at 360 hertz to produce movement which was accurate to 1 second a month. Around the same time, Kelly Johnson's team at Skunk Works was developing groundbreaking exotic technologies at Area 51. Former Nazi rocket scientists were relocated strategically to places like the Army's testing facility at White Sands Proving Grounds. There, they would make breakthroughs in aeronautical and rocket technology. Aerospace defense contractor McDonnell Douglas continued its collaboration with NASA and the military on groundbreaking projects like the Saturn V rocket, the F-15 Strike Eagle, and numerous classified programs that helped propel the U.S. into the space age.
We have been given the scientific knowledge, the technical ability, and the materials to pursue the exploration of the universe. To ignore these great resources would be a corruption of a God-given ability.
This progress was driven by pioneering airspace engineers like Dr. Bob Wood, who played a key role in the industry. It's perhaps unsurprising, while all of these breakthroughs were happening, more and more Americans were seeing UFOs and reporting them to the military. And one of the most common things that people began reporting was a strange, black, triangle-shaped craft. The description sounds like the long-rumored black project craft from Skunk Works known as Aurora. The black triangle has been seen over areas as far as Europe's North Sea. After a wave of sightings, a British defense briefing note said that there is no knowledge in the Ministry of Defense of a black program of this nature. But it also added, although it would not surprise the relevant desk officers in the air staff and defense intelligence staff if it did exist. The U.S. military, who were working to keep their black projects secure, saw an opportunity when the UFO sightings related to these exotic craft became more commonplace. Ladies and gentlemen, hot salt from Firecracker Farm is the real deal. It's not just heat, it's flavor that elevates everything that you cook. The best thing to happen to food since fire. That's a bold statement, but I'm going to go ahead and agree with that. It's delightful. One of the best things about this brand is there's a real person behind it. His name is Alex, and he makes these in small batches, so it's not always easy to get. You don't want to miss out. All of the flavors are great. I have tried all of them. You really can't go wrong. Seriously, try it on everything. Steaks, vegetables, everything in between. I love cooking. I like cooking at home. I don't like putting sauces and overbearing things on the things that I cook, so I tried a little bit of the salt. And if I'm being honest, I tried a little bit too much the first time. It was a little spicy. So I had to back it off a little bit, and it made everything that I cook at home taste better. So it's an easy addition to the things that I already make. It tasted amazing. I was using the product for well over 6 months before Alex reached out to present as the sponsor for Change Agents. Easy peasy. I was already doing it. No additional time. A touch point with it in my personal life. I can talk about it from personal experience. Love what the brand stands for. Love what the brand was founded around. Enjoy the person who founded the brand. I mean, this is a match made in heaven. Get out of the comfort zone of what you can get in the grocery store. Go online to Firecracker Farm and use the code IRONCLAD for 15% off of your first order. You're going to be shocked at how much more of a flavor it brings out in what you cook.
So I am the person who wrote some of the most original revelations about what happened at Area 51 with UAP deception campaigns. They were called UFO deception campaigns. I also have seen documents and report about them of the CIA's UFO office out at Area 51 where they realized this is terrific. You know, people think it's a UFO. Better that than having our program revealed to the Soviets. Now, does that mean every UFO sighting in the history of mankind is a U-2 spy plane? Of course not. Of course not. But it raises the question that you are raising about what a deception campaign actually is.
She explains, real Black Project technological developments are just as mind-blowing as the idea of aliens, especially breakthroughs being made by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, also known as DARPA.
DARPA's job is to create the vast weapon systems of the future. They work on programs that are 25 years ahead of what we see. And they don't necessarily reveal them until they have to. The F-117 fighter jet, that program was, no one knew about it for almost 20 years. So you have to, again, does that mean everything is unclassified? Of course not, or not known. But listen, people love to talk about UAPs and, Tic Tacs, and I get it. I just happen to find the actual things that human beings do and keep secret so much more interesting than the fantasy part of it. I mean, if you read my book, Surprise, Kill, Vanish, about the CIA's paramilitary operations, you can't believe what people are capable of.
One of the most famous incidents of a UFO deception campaign happened in the late 1970s and early 1980s when a World War II veteran named Paul Benowitz began seeing strange craft flying around his home near Nevada's Kirtland Air Force Base. After reporting the sightings with officials, he began having encounters with people who had reportedly been abducted by aliens and witnessed the aftermath of cattle mutilations. He even intercepted radio signals that led him to believe that an alien invasion was imminent. However, it would later turn out that he was a part of an extremely elaborate misinformation campaign conducted by Air Force Office of Special Investigations Officer Richard Doty. The idea was to discredit Benowitz, who likely had seen secret military aircraft he'd mistaken for an alien UFO.
It became apparent to me that my supplying information to the government through Doty on the activities of Paul Benowitz, APRO, and to a lesser extent several other individuals was to be a part of this equation. I also discovered that whatever it was that Benowitz was involved with, he was the subject of considerable interest on the part of not one, but several government agencies, and that they were actively trying to defuse him by pumping as much disinformation through him as he could possibly absorb.
As reporter and podcaster Chrissy Newton explains, his story took a tragic end as Benowitz was eventually hospitalized as his mental condition deteriorated.
I just literally had this conversation with Richard Doty last week, and he's saying that they were not taking advantage of a man that had mental health issues. And I do think that is, we know that Paul had some codependency issues. He was already really deeply involved into UFOs, and he, no one could change his mind. And Richard Doty says that, but instead of maybe helping a man or removing him from projects and giving him government contracts, they should have just left him alone and talked to his family and just, found a way not to do what they did to Paul, because I think that they really did a number on his mental health. And Doty fights with me a little bit on this podcast, talking about, saying, well, we were taking care of his physical health. The doctors were looking at his medication. And I'm saying, well, I said, Richard, I'm like, it doesn't mean it takes care of your mental health. I said, and, you guys weren't doing that. And you know that. And it was the CIA and it was multiple other groups that were working on this disinformation campaign, and they knew what was going on.
Jane's Defense Weekly editor and author Nick Cook recounts another story involving the controversial scientist Thomas Townsend Brown, who in addition to being obsessed with time travel, also worked on aerospace black projects.
Thomas Townsend Brown's name is associated with the Philadelphia Project. The Philadelphia Project, for those who don't know about it, is this mythical, extraordinary story about a warship that is spirited from one set of docks to another, purportedly through the generation of massive doses of electricity around the hull. And of course, you look at that and you go, this is a patently ridiculous story, and particularly as it was supposedly happening just after World War II. So perhaps you should ask the question, so if that's a cover story for something, what was it trying to cover up? For me, the interesting thing, and I talk about this in the Hump Zero Point, the interesting thing was that at the time that those stories of the Philadelphia experiment were coming out, which when you think about it, it was sort of stealth with a small s. At that time, stealth with a capital S was being developed in secret for aircraft like the Lockheed stealth fighter and the B-2 stealth bomber. So maybe you should ask the question, was that some kind of early preparatory story, a disinformation story, to mask appearances or rumors of stealth programs that were beginning to come together in the 80s, the late 70s and the early 80s, that people like Bill Sweetman and I were beginning to look at and investigate. So, there are many different forms of intelligence. There are many different forms of counterintelligence. There are hard, solid walls that you build in and compartmentalized silos of information that you put in place to protect information. But you may actually also like a little bit of kind of weird top cover as well. And that can be provided by extraordinary and, on the face of it, highly incredible stories that sort of have a taint of the sort of the original data within.
When looking at the advancements in military technology developed through black programs and these programs' history, it seems very plausible that the recent drone sightings were the result of encounters with advanced human technology. And it seems equally plausible that much of the extraterrestrial discussion could be driven by misinformation efforts. But even experts like Nick Cook think there is something strange happening, especially with the recent drone sightings.
Colorado farmers were complaining about being disturbed by drones. But these drones didn't behave like any drones that I really know of. They shared some characteristics. Some of them looked like regular quadcopters. But then the reports started to shift and change. They're reported to be, car-sized, truck-sized, small, 4x4 truck-sized vehicles that have persistent loitering capability. Those two things just don't go together. Big, heavy drones being able to loiter for hours at a time, that's not what conventional drones do. So you have to then start asking other questions. Don't leap to conclusions, but just ask the questions. What could do that? Are there any parallels from history? Yeah, well, there are. There are parallels, as I said earlier, going back to New Mexico in 1947. So what are we dealing with here? It looks like we're dealing with something else, some other phenomenon that has a capacity in certain circumstances to mimic what we take as drones. Which sounds impossible. So already I'm straying into dangerous territory here with my Sherlock Holmesian mantra. But, at the very least, you have to start by asking the questions and not simply jumping to the conclusion that these are conventional drones.
Cook has spent years examining UAP and exotic aerospace innovations from a nuts and bolts perspective. But even after working directly with the people involved in secretive black projects, he's not convinced that we fully understand what is happening, and if what we're seeing actually originates from Earth. And he's not alone in this thinking. After years of working with contractors and major aerospace companies, Dr. Bob Wood, who we mentioned earlier, eventually left his role in the defense industry. From there, he would go on to serve as the research director for the Mutual UFO Network. The group's mission is to, quote, provide a platform for experiencers and UFO abductees to report a UFO or report an alien abduction. So, What if technology from non-human intelligence really is behind the New Jersey drones, UAP, and the UFOs showing up since the 1950s? Well, there might be some pretty compelling evidence that it could be the case. That's next time on the series finale of Black Project, a Change Agents original series.